I literally called on 94 shoe companies before Reebok licensed that. And I don't know, we sold about 40 million pair of shoes. 90% of the athletes ran faster when they put our insole in. 80% stopped faster. 80% started faster. And so we're making better product that performs better out of what they're throwing away. He looked like Santa Claus, great guy. And he coached world record holders, Olympic champions. And he gets on the phone and he goes, well, you're young. You won't listen to me. But here's how you run a good marathon. I would say in every case, those who achieve their best and those who don't, it's the willingness to.
Welcome, Stuart Jenkins, to The Young Athletic. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Stuart,
honored to be here.
Yes, well, honored to have you. You are the founder of Blumaka Insoles. I just found out that Blumaka means blue earth, and what was the other one? Beloved?
In Hawaiian, maka means beloved one, so it's blue beloved one or blue earth. And yeah, Blumaka, we make different kind of footwear and foam components out of recycled waste foam from the athletic footwear industry. Mm-hmm. Patty, you wouldn't believe it. Here's a little factoid for you. The athletic footwear industry generates enough foam. I'll give you three choices to make 1 million pair of new shoes a year,
okay,
5 billion pair of new shoes a year, or 100 million pair of new shoes a year. Which do you think it is?
Dang. I'm going to go with C. 100 million?
B.
Wow.
I can make 5 billion new insoles.
With just the excess?
Just the foam waste from the athletic footwear industry.
Wow.
And, that's pretty remarkable when you think that the athletic industry makes 23 billion pairs of shoes. So you can make 20% of the insoles required for all the athletic shoes in the world from just their waste, if they cared enough to do it. And the insoles that we would make would outperform, I believe, every insole that they now put in a new running shoe or athletic shoe.
Yeah.
In terms of cushioning, longevity of cushioning, energy return, compression rate. So you're either going to wear it or breathe it. Right now you're breathing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it's getting burned off.
It is being burned.
Well, I want to start with your running experience. I was reading somewhere that you would run every day for 8 years to train for your marathon, and then you told me kindly it's actually been 22 years. So just tell us a little bit about, how you got started running, why you love it so much, how that streak was.
Well, I'm a native Nebraskan, and so there's only 2 seasons in Nebraska. Football season and spring practice for football season. And as a 130-pound freshman in high school, I found that football probably wasn't going to be my best sport. But I played. I went to a boarding school in St. Louis, same place you went, Principia, and they had a freshman team. And maybe selfishly or maybe self-knowledge, on the football team, it really frustrated me that other athletes would not work as hard as I would work. And you were dependent upon 10 other people to care as much as you could. And I didn't ever find 10 people that cared as much about it as I did. And I remember sitting there one day and the cross-country team ran by, and I didn't even know what cross-country was, but I noticed that the person that ran the hardest was in the lead. And I thought, over there, you can be as good as you want to be. Mm-hmm. Your work product will result in your results. And I still can see in my mind's eye that group of runners going by while I was looking through my face mask.
Oh, yeah? Your helmet?
Lamenting the fact that some of my teammates were horsing around.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, that equated to a moment of there's a lot of freedom in being the best you can. And maybe I wasn't strong enough to carry 10 other people or good enough or whatever, but I longed for that sense of freedom to find out, how good can I be? And that got me started running. And I wasn't fast. And I found that the longer I did, the better I was compared to the database. So I just kept looking for longer and longer races.
Yeah, the longer distances. So you weren't a speed demon?
No, I really wasn't. And I had to work on jealousy. I mean, my brother could go out and run a, fast quarter, a half mile. And, I couldn't run fast downhill with a tailwind. And so I was, my track coach at the time, I went through football season, then I played basketball, had the same experience at basketball where nobody cared as much as I did, or I didn't think they did. Maybe I was too self-absorbed, and went out for track, and, they basically said, run as fast as you want.
Yeah.
And great coaches, great camaraderie. And the coach, I said, well, I'd like to know about cross country. What do I need to do? And he said, well, what you should do is go home and run about 500 miles this summer. And he put together a schedule where I was running about 35 miles a week. And out there on the ranch, I remember I was running, it was one of my first 8-mile runs. Mm. Of course, that's when 8 miles seemed like a tremendous distance. And I was between the Callaway Cemetery and my friend Charles Nansel's farm on this dusty, dirty path they call a road. And I said to myself, I think anybody that works hard and is dedicated can run in the United States Olympic trials in the marathon. Now, why that popped in my head, Patty, I'm not sure.
You were this is after freshman year.
You're I'm between my freshman and sophomore year, and notice I didn't say the Olympics. I said the Olympic trials, and I thought you had to have a lot of talent to run in the Olympic trials in a marathon or in the mile or half mile or quarter mile or sprints or something where you had to have talent. But I thought that the marathon put a premium on hard work and commitment and dedication. And I thought, the hard work, commitment, and dedication are free. Mm. They don't come really from inheritance. If you're going to run in the Olympics or Olympic trials in the sprint, there's probably some genetics involved. And I didn't figure I had genetics on my side. But I thought hard work, dedication, commitment, those were things that I could manufacture in my heart and soul. And so I set the goal of running in the United States Olympic trials in the marathon, which seems a crazy and fleeting thought, but that became the goal that day.
Really? And
that's what I worked for every day for the next 8 years, every day. And kind of funny that would pop into your mind out there in central Nebraska, in Custer County with 13,000 souls in the county and about 150,000 head of cattle. But that's what I did.
So you had a moment of revelation and you thought, I can do it.
I just thought it was possible.
Yeah.
I don't know that I thought it was possible. I thought that anybody that worked hard and was dedicated could do that. So I set about trying to achieve it.
What did your high school coach say when you came back, fit and ready to run that sophomore season? Well,
my first run back as a sophomore, we had this road around our campus that was about a mile. And, of course, they measured it out to exactly a mile. And to test my fitness, first day back, he said, well, come over to my house, and I want you to run 3 miles. And he was very disciplined and when he told you to do something, I'd seen him call off a workout or tell you to start over. If he told you to run a 70-second quarter and you ran the 68-second quarter, he would say, "Get back on the line. That doesn't count. I told you to run 70-second quarters," because he wanted you to understand your pace. So when he said, "I want you to run 3 miles at 6-minute pace," I was very focused on running 3 miles at a 6-minute pace. And, I come around the first one, and I still have the workout in my log, and I think I ran 5:58. The next one I ran 5:56, and he kind of yells at me. He goes, can you run faster? And I go, "Of course." And he goes, "Well, then do it." I'm like, "Well, you told me to run 6 minutes, and I think I ran the last mile in about 5:42 or something. And for a sophomore in high school, that was pretty good. But it showed that I had worked out,
Yeah.
and that I was fit to train. And so he didn't really ask me. He made me demonstrate my level of fitness. Mm-hmm. But it's funny, I remember that workout. Nobody's asked me about that in 50 years.
It's funny the things you remember. I can picture the campus mile.
Yeah.
Very well.
Yeah, well.
We ran it a lot for soccer.
Yeah, for sure.
So did you have some success in cross country and track those next couple of years?
Yeah, well, I was very lucky. I had a great, we had great coaching. Mm-hmm. I think that coach, Jack Irely, I think his teams, when you'd go team by team in an event, I think his teams won over 90% of the track meets or cross-country races that they entered against the competition.
Wow.
Over his career. So the guy knew how to coach. It wasn't an accident. Interestingly enough, he had polio as a child and never ran a step in his life. And yet he was a great musician, great mathematician. He was a thinker. And so we had a great coach. And then I was fortunate that we ended up with 3 other guys that were nearly, maybe as crazy as I was. And we were all willing to work hard. And so this core group of 4 guys, Mark, Tim, and Jamie, helped each other because, we could go run together. When the other guy wasn't feeling that great about getting out there and doing a long run, the other guy pushed you along, or if you were slagging in a run. But it became very competitive. We ended up having 3 of the top 4 2-milers in the state of Missouri, and we won the state championship in cross country. And I think we had 4 guys in the top 5 at the state cross country championship, which is pretty remarkable for a little school.
Yeah.
I think we were 1, 2, 4, and 5, or 1, 2, 5, and 6. And so we had success as a team, and we were developing strengths. Those guys were faster than I was at every distance. So, we had a guy, a great half-miler, a great miler, great 2-miler. So those events were not great for me because or I wasn't as good as they were. But again, the farther we ran, the better I did. And so I just kept looking for longer and longer races.
Yeah, so cross country was more your thing than track?
It was, but even there, the guys were faster.
Yeah.
We were running at that time, I think, 2.5 or 3 miles. And one of those guys went on and won 7 state championships. He won 3 or 4 national championships in Division III college. So, it wasn't like it was Our Lady of the Sister of the Poor. So I was getting beat in races by pretty good people. And I remember in some races in high school and college that the races just felt like another workout because you were still competing against the same guys. I mean, you'd get into a cross-country race with 250 people, and pretty soon you'd look over to your right, and there's Tim, and you look to your left, and there's Mark, and it was just like a workout.
Yeah. So when did you say, I'm going to start training for this marathon and try to make that goal?
Well, really as part of the workout, I don't think I ever voiced that to my coaches because I don't know if that would have been appropriate. But, the coach recognized that I was a distance person, and I kept pushing my training runs longer and longer. And I wouldn't advise most people have a high schooler run 20 miles, but for me, that's what I needed because I wasn't fast. Mm-hmm. And I told him I wanted to run the St. Louis Marathon as part of my training. And he said, well, I'll let you run a marathon if you can run 30 miles. And
30 miles first.
Yeah.
And then the marathon.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I remember we scheduled that run on a Saturday, and it's the one and only time I ever saw him get in his car and check up on us. Mm. And he monitored that run, and he brought some guys down from the college to run with us. And I think we started out with 6 or 7 guys, and only 2 guys finished that run, and one of them was myself. And at that point, I knew I had an ability to run distance. And then I told you we had 2 guys that qualified, or were the 3 guys that were the fastest 2-milers in the state. And I was 3rd. And at that time, in the district meet in track, you could only go to the state meet if you were one of the top 2 guys.
Oh, really?
At the district meet.
Yeah, yeah.
And the school could only enter 2 people in any event at districts.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's changed.
Coach Simon changed that rule, so it went by time. So I couldn't go to the state meet, even though I had the 3rd fastest time in the state.
Wow.
And that kind of frosted my pumpkin. And I thought, again, it felt like football practice. I said, well, they're not going to let you be your best. So I said, to hell with this. I'm going to go run the Boston Marathon. And so my senior year, instead of running track, I said, I'm going to enter the Boston Marathon. And of course, the high school athletic association wouldn't let you do both. I don't know, pinhead politics. But anyway, my coach said, geez, I don't really know anything about really coaching a marathon. You need to talk to this guy, Ted Hayden, the University of Chicago track coach. And he'd coached the Olympic team in 72, Munich, sadly. Mm. And he looked like Santa Claus, great guy. And he coached world record holders, Olympic champions. And he gets on the phone. And he goes, well, you're young. You won't listen to me. But here's how you run a good marathon. You want to know how? Yes, Mr. Hayden. Well, run 20 miles at a pace you can keep, and then go like hell. He says everybody goes out too fast, and you'll go out too fast, and you'll call me and tell me you went out too fast. But the way you run a marathon is you run 20 miles at a pace you can keep, and then you go like hell. Negative splits. Of course, so I signed up for the Boston Marathon. It was only later that I found out and read the fine print. You had to be 18 years old. And keep in mind, I had to write Jock Semple and Will Cloney, the same cat of characters who threw Catherine Switzer out for being a female in the race. Hmm. So they ran that thing like an old boys club down at the Lenox Hotel in Boston. But I was 17 years old. But because my St. Louis Marathon time was pretty good, apparently they let it slide because they let me in, and I was the youngest entrant in that race. And so I went out and went to Boston, and I'd heard Heartbreak Hill stories, and I'd never seen Heartbreak Hill, but Heartbreak Hill. I thought it was just a tad shorter than Mount Everest, and so you go out in Hopkinton and you start running downhill, and I get past like freight train passing a tramp. People are going by me so fast, so hard, it was crazy. And I mean, I'm getting passed and passed, and I'm going backwards.
Were you trying to stick with
I
your
was trying to
pace?
stick with my pace.
Okay.
Now, keep in mind, you can't even imagine this. At that time, those guys, Will Cloney, Jock Semple, they were so cheap and so committed to this quote unquote amateur crap that there were no mile markers,
Oh, yeah.
no official mile markers, no clocks, no aid stations. If you wanted
Wow.
water, you relied on the goodwill of the people of Boston.
Wow.
So, I got my watch, but you don't really know where you are. So, you talk about Coach Irely and saying you're going to run a 70-second quarter. Well, this is where it came in handy because I was able to know my pace. And of course, one of the great disciplines in life is not being influenced by others, right? Not peer pressure. And people are, I feel great. I'm going out, boom, boom, So I just stuck with my pace. And I knew that Heartbreak Hill started at about 17 miles and was a series of 3 hills. And I'd gone out pretty conservatively and go up a little rise, looking around, where the hell's Heartbreak Hill? Go up another rise. Go up a third rise, and there's a fire truck and a band. And I'm like, well, that's kind of a hill. And I said to the guy that I was passing, I said, when do we get to the top of Heartbreak Hill? And he goes, that's it, smart ass. I go, that was Heartbreak Hill? Well, I told everybody that story, how Heartbreak Hill's nothing and blah, blah, blah. Well, the next year I went out a lot faster. I found Heartbreak Hill.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, I negative split, and I think I finished, gosh, man, you're making me go back. I think I finished 135th or something like that, and I ran a 229, which was,
Quick.
I think, one of the top 1 or 2 times in the nation for my age group, and had a great experience. And I was proud to call Ted Hayden and say, a negative split. And he goes, well, you're the first damn guy to ever listen to me in his first marathon, which made me proud.
Yeah, no. When I did my first marathon, it was like, I guess my only marathon at this point. But it was like, if you go out too fast, it catches up to you at the end.
Yeah, it becomes a death march.
Yeah, it's really tough.
And you,
And everyone wants to qualify for Boston, their first marathon.
Yeah.
And it's like, don't try to qualify the first time.
20 miles at a pace you know you can keep, and then go like hell. It works every time.
All right. Well, I'll try that when I get back into shape.
But that's a long story, I guess. I think I'm off topic, but
No, I wanted to hear. We're building into your Olympic trial experience.
yeah.
You eventually made it. You qualified.
Yeah, I did. So I kept working and went to college, and of course this goal of qualifying for the Olympic trials remained. And as you alluded to, so 8 years after I set that goal, so my senior year in college, I'm going back to Boston, and this is the first race that you can qualify for the Olympic trials. And the way they set the Olympic trial qualifying standard is they take the 100th fastest marathon run the year before by an American, and that becomes your qualifying time to beat. And so I go to Boston, and now I've run every day for 8 years. I didn't miss one single day. And I looked in my training log. I never forget it, sitting on the edge of the bed, and I'm penciling in my mileage for the week and the day, and of course the cumulative miles. And I noticed that I had run 26,086 miles since I started running as a freshman in high school. And it doesn't take a genius to realize that if you're running a 26-mile event and you've trained for 26,000 miles, that you've put in 1,000 miles of preparation for the race you're undertaking the next day. Yeah. And that 1,000 to 1 preparation to event ratio, I think, works in anything. I mean, you've heard the 1,000-hour rule for musicians and the Beatles. And I think the 1,000-to-1 training to event is probably good for marathoning as well. And so I ran the Boston Marathon. I had to run, this is funny, I had to run 2 hours, 19 minutes, and 4 seconds to qualify. My previous best had been 2:21:35, I think.
So it was faster than you had run before.
Yeah, it was 2.5 minutes faster.
Wow.
And so 2:19:04. And I ran 2:19 flat. I qualified by 4 seconds. And when you think about that, you go, 1, 2, 3, 4. After 26 miles, 385 yards, 8 years, and 26,086 miles of training. And I think it demonstrates that I didn't have the talent to skip any days. Mm. And so people say, why do you run every day? Well, I needed to. Now, in our training, I also was coached very well in terms of knowing how to rest. And people say, well, you get too much stress. But I really knew how to take light days and heavy days. And so it wasn't just put your nose to the grindstone and beat yourself up. But I've also thought about the fact that I've got a lot of credit in my life, a lot of attention maybe, for qualifying for the Olympic trials. And I think, really, 4 seconds really makes a difference of who I am? Because I really felt like whether I had qualified or not, I knew one thing. I'd run the very best race I had ever run in my life. And I probably ran the very best race I could have ever run in my life. I mean, I was on that very narrow edge between triumph and disaster for the entire race. And
do you remember how you felt? Like, oh, I'm close, I need to keep the pace?
Oh, no, I remember very well because at a mile to go, I was calculating enough. I'd been running, my average pace was 5:18 a mile for 26 miles. And I realized that I had to run about a 5:08 last mile to qualify. And, trying to run a 5:08 mile for me after 25 miles was hard. I also remember passing Kenmore Square, Boston Red Sox Park, knowing that I had a mile to go, and I knew I had to run a 5:08, and I saw two guys probably 150 yards ahead of me. And I said, I need to chase them down. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, I'm going to wait till the underpass at Huntington Avenue to chase them down. And then I immediately said, what the hell are you thinking? You've been chasing this goal for 8 years. I mean, if you're going to do this, you got to saddle your horse, grab your spurs, and kick the dog. I mean, you're going, man. And so I didn't want to take off or go because it was so mentally challenging at that point. But I remember saying, no, it's time to go. And I went. I passed those guys, and neither one of them qualified for the Olympic trials. But it's those kind of momentary decisions that if I had hesitated 10 or 15 more strides to engage in the pursuit,
who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, two things come to mind. When I run and when I try to kick it in at the end, I always think like, what are you afraid of? Why are you going so slow? So that's mental conversation you have with yourself.
Well, I'll tell you what you're afraid of. Fatigue makes a coward of us all.
Yeah.
And I believe that's a Vince Lombardi quote, that fatigue makes a coward of us all. And I think it's true. And fatigue, you never permanently overcome fatigue. You have to face that demon every time you exert yourself. And I think that's one of the things that makes sports or athletics or physical challenges difficult, is because even if you've mastered something once, fatigue will come calling to really test your resolve of, yes, I overcame it last time, but do I believe I can overdo it again? And it makes you a coward. It causes you to be fearful. And of course, it's very difficult to do anything well when you're afraid.
Yeah. And you think about, those high school teammates that you had that weren't ready to step up to that challenge. Those football teammates that might have.
Yeah, I want to be careful about disparaging them. They may have been, but I think it's fair to say that one of the big differentiators between those who achieve their best, I would say in every case, those who achieve their best and those who don't, it's the willingness to be courageous, emotionally, mentally courageous, when physical fatigue is trying to tell you to stop. And that's why I think it's really, Tiger Woods is a great golfer, but how would he do with my swing, right? Michael Jordan is a great basketball player, but it sure as heck helped that he was 6'6", or 6'7", or whatever. Now, he did a heck of a lot with that, but Michael Jordan would have been Michael Jordan if he was 5'6". No matter, and Michael Jordan at 5'6" could have had the same mental attitude as Michael Jordan at 6'6" had, but we wouldn't know Michael Jordan at 5'6". It doesn't. So, I mean, when you think about what separates good athletes from great athletes, I think there are good athletes that have every bit as much mental fortitude, courage, strength as the very best athletes. But it's those athletes that have that rare combination of mental fortitude, courage, and physical gifts. Yeah. I mean, you go watch a Laker game up close. I could practice for 1,000 hours 1,000 times, and I'm not going to guard LeBron James with my physical skills.
Yeah, I've thought of, I work at this very competitive soccer environment, and some players want to go pro, and I think like pro athletes are kind of born, they have the physical talents, because not everyone has those gifts. Obviously, you need the right combination of all those things, but you have to have the gifts.
There's very few pro athletes that don't have a physical gift.
Yeah.
And, youth sports is kind of one of those things. I mean, you can't really talk about it because it's like going out and kicking somebody's dog or something. But, you've got, I don't know what the stats are, but how many high school kids get college scholarships? It's like 1%.
Yeah, very few.
And yet I see parents on the side of 7 and 8-year-old games talking about scholarships and how great their kids are, and parents living vicariously through kids' sports. And I think that, as with anything, when you put more emphasis on the results than you put on the inputs, especially at a young age, you're generally going to end up with very bad outcomes. Parents, I think, would be much better off worrying about the inputs of fortitude, character, hard work, discipline, civility, humility, courage than they are about how many goals Susie and Johnny scored in the fifth grade or the 5-year-old scrum match and talking about college. And I think a lot is lost in the value of sports when you simply are using sports as a way to stroke parents' egos and get a college scholarship.
Yeah. Going back to the mentality, obviously you've got this mentality, this fortitude to work hard and be disciplined and persevere. Did you recognize that in other people along the way? Because it is, a unique gift in its own thing. And were you drawn to those people and sort of...
Oh, for sure.
Became friends with them?
I mean, I was drawn to coaches that demanded it. The coaches that didn't interest me. I didn't enjoy it. And maybe to an unhealthy degree, I self-selected into groups that were had that same driving passion. Maybe to an unhealthy degree in college. I think it would have been better to broaden out a little bit. But we can talk about athletic gifts. I think everybody gets a gift. And I think I'm not going to sit here and say, pro athletes are pro athletes because they have a physical gift. And I got to where I got in Olympic trials because I had some superhuman ability to be disciplined and work hard and to be dedicated. I think I generally came out as a little kid as somebody that was willing to work hard. Now, my dad, for sure, on the ranch, I mean, when he went to church, the only church he went to was the altar of hard work. I mean, you could do a lot of things out there on that ranch and get away with it. But I'll tell you, the one thing you could not get away with was being lazy. That was just absolutely outside his field of understanding. So I was certainly brought up in an environment where hard work was at the center of family life. And a ranch gives you ample opportunity. At a ranch, you only work on the days that end in Y or when cattle eat, and that's every single day. And but I think I was given the ability to work hard and be dedicated and be disciplined. Those things didn't. I was more comfortable there than uncomfortable. So I don't want to sit here and say it's because of my great mental fortitude or something like that. I think I found comfort in that discipline. I know I found freedom in that discipline.
You like to be around it.
Yeah. And I also think that the greatest gift my mother gave me was the ability to, she really purposely trained me to not be influenced by peer pressure. And I think peer pressure can make you be very undisciplined and do things that are not salubrious to improved performance.
Yeah. So you had a good foundation is what you're saying?
I think so.
Great foundation.
Yeah. I mean, I lived in a dormitory, boarding school, and many of my friends found this to be terribly restrictive. All kinds of rules. Well, hell, I had so much fun there. I couldn't be out after 10. Well, if you run 100 miles a week, you don't want to be up after 10. I'm an early bird. I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Didn't bother me. You didn't need to get on the megaphone or the speakers and tell me to wake up because my butt was out of bed already. You got to live with your friends.
Yeah.
I mean, what?
You know what? When I went there too, it was the same way. Like I loved it.
I don't know why you'd live life trying to find the way to skirt the rules. And I had friends that, I mean, it was their full-time job to just come, just to cross that line as many times as they could. It just wasn't something that interested me.
Yeah, just
and by the way, those guys are great guys and probably a hell of a lot more fun than I was to be around. But I just never understood, just always flirting with the out of bounds mark.
Yeah, just wasn't your thing.
It wasn't me. And again, I think I was wired that way. I don't think I have some moral, ethical superiority. It just didn't interest me.
Yeah. So let's, talk about your professional life. You've obviously been working with footwear forever. You want to start with Deckers? You want to start with Blumaka?
Well, no.
You want to start with before then?
Yeah, I think I'd probably start before. I've been in the footwear industry now almost 50 years. I started, and again, luck, right? Luck, perseverance. So I'm running, and I'm, hand cobbling. You win a pair of shoes at the local Easter race, and they're of course what the local store wants to get rid of. They're not the best sellers. They might be stiff or hard, and I just started modifying my shoes. If the shoe was too stiff, I got Mom's butcher knife out and cut the soles and put a flex groove in it. If it was too hot, I just got a paper punch and put holes in it.
Really?
If something was rubbing me, I cut it off. And it really just thought, well, obviously whoever's making these shoes aren't making them right. So, I read this book called Travels with Charlie by John Steinbeck. I recommend everybody read that book. Great book.
Travels with Charlie?
Travels with Charlie. Charlie's his dog, and he circumnavigates the United States, starting in Maine and goes around the edge. And it's a very interesting story because he just meets people along the way. Probably one of the most riveting stories about racism I've ever read is him watching young mothers yell and scream at black children trying to go to school in New Orleans. It's riveting. Anyway, I thought, well, I don't have a dog named Charlie, but what if I run across the United States and be the youngest person to do that? Now, why did that come to my mind? I don't know. So as a senior in high school, I was trying to get a sponsor so I wouldn't have to go to college, and I think I was trying to raise $20,000. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Too young to drink beer, don't drink beer anyway, but, so you couldn't get a beer sponsor. Kellogg's offered me all the Frosted Flakes. Nike offered me 26 pair of shoes, but no money.
Yeah.
And this guy who was a trustee at the school I was attending, he said, well, Stuart, I have a friend who's an inventor. He invented one-handled water faucets, single control water faucets. Instead of the hot and cold, in the middle you pull it out and turn it, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
And he's an inventor, and he's working on a new shoe. Maybe he'd be interested. So I get a call from this guy from a place I had never heard of in my life called Pebble Beach, California. I mean, it could have been Compton. I had no idea. And he tells me he's thinking about putting air in shoes. Keep in mind, Patty, I know you can't imagine a time before there were air shoes, but there were no air shoes. And so we start working on, he hires me for $500 a month, gave me a car to drive. I'd sleep on the floor of the office. He had a shoe repair shop where we were crafting shoes, trying to perfect his air shoe. We were moving air from the heel to the ball of the foot through a channel. And about a year and a half later, Nike comes out with air shoes. They're doing it in a completely different way, which took a lot of wind out of our sales. And I'm young, and he's not a great salesman. So he sent me out, and I literally called on 94 shoe companies over the next 8 years before Reebok licensed that. And I don't know, we sold about 40 million pair of shoes. under license to Reebok. And I got rejected by 94 shoe companies. And, same story, perseverance, luck, persistence. But I mean, how lucky are you that here you are, this high school kid, and you get connected to an inventor whose invention actually becomes successful? If you filled up the Rose Bowl with every United States utility patent holder, 106,000 people, if that represented all issued United States utility patents, and you told everybody to leave who'd never made a penny off of their patent, you'd have 6 to 8 people left.
Wow.
So that's pretty lucky. So that got me in the footwear business. And then other people would call me and say, hey, if you can sell that dumb air shoe thing, what about this? And so in like 86, I introduced carbon fiber to footwear. Now carbon fiber is a huge deal because the carbon fiber is a lot better. It really never worked out, but licensed technology to Reebok, or a new Nike called Tuned Air. So I was just on the periphery of footwear. And then up in Santa Barbara, an old friend asked me to head up innovation at Deckers. So I kind of committed the sin of corporate work. And so I was in charge of new ideas and bringing new technology in, and found these 2 guys in France who had this idea of making big shoes, oversized shoes. And it was Nico Mermoud and Jean-Luc Diard, and they had a brand called Hoka. And they had sold about, I think when I found them, they'd sold about 800, 900 pair of shoes in the United States. A retailer in the U.S., Johnny Halverstadt from Boulder Running Company, called and said, hey, this is a cool idea. Now, keep in mind, this is in the middle of the barefoot running boom. Yeah. 5 Fingers and Aunt Tilly was healed running barefoot, and everybody should run barefoot.
The Born to Run book.
Born to Run, great book. And so this is the absolute polar opposite of that, in a sense. And I brought that into Deckers and really advocated for the acquisition of Hoka. And we did the early development on all the early shoes. And
so you bought them out.
Deckers put a minority investment in. I can't remember right now, but I think Deckers placed $1 million minority investment in Hoka before they had $1 million in revenue.
Wow.
And I remember people at Deckers saying, well, Stuart, you're off trend. It's all about barefoot. And why would we do this? It's off trend. And I said, how do you innovate if you're on trend? You got to do. But it was really it's funny how there's certain things in life you see and other things you miss. And I can point out the misses. But, I'd been running long enough that I'd remembered back in the late 70s or mid 70s, we were running in a shoe called the Nike Oregon Waffle Racer. And it had no padding. It was basically a barefoot shoe. And you know what I remember about that shoe, Patty?
It was terrible.
It hurt like hell to run it. And I didn't think that barefoot running was going to feel any better 35 years later than it felt then. And as the CEO of Deckers says, I don't think Angel Martinez would say, people don't willingly choose discomfort over comfort. Now, maybe high heels or something, but I mean, when it's coming to running. And so I had run in barefoot shoes. And I knew you couldn't run on gravel or rock barefoot without prancing. I knew that at some point, if you're trying to run downhill barefoot, that you had to pull back because there was too much pounding. And you go out in the Hokas and, man, you could go as fast as you want. It felt good. And the rocker that Jean-Luc put on that shoe, the rocker bottom.
Yeah.
It was really about, I think the most misunderstood thing about Hoka is that it's not about just making a bigger, fatter shoe. It was about making a shoe that was bigger and lighter, and it had a rocker bottom. He said to me one day, I said, why is there a rocker on this front of this shoe? And he goes, well, Stuart, who are the fastest marathoners in the world? Patty, you can tell me, who are the fastest marathoners in the world?
Kenyans.
You say the Kenyans. That's the exact answer I gave. And he said, no, Stuart. Fastest marathon athletes in the world are the wheelchair athletes. They're beating the Kenyans by an hour because they're rolling. And so he put this rocker on the front of the shoe. And if you look now, every single oversized, every single running shoe from a big brand, Nike, Hoka, Adidas, Asics, On, whatever the brand you pick, all of them have oversized midsoles and rocker bottoms. I mean, he created a... And, you know, what's really fascinating to me about that, Patty, is what the hell were Nike and New Balance and Adidas and Asics and all those guys with all that money, with all those PhDs in biomechanics doing? How the hell were they spending their money in that R&D lab? And they never figured that out. It took two French guys in the Alps on their own, hand carving big blocks of foam to do it. Think of that. Those brands were spending probably cumulative 100, 150 million a year with fancy titles, and they completely missed it. Yeah. And not only that, when Hoka came out, it took them 7 years before Nike copied them. And then it wasn't until Nike copied them that everybody else copied them.
Yeah, well, they saw something that nobody else saw, I guess.
Well, you know, to me, though, once they started, I remember early on, I'd look at our sales in online sales, you know, right after we got involved, this first few hundred pair of shoes. One of our biggest customers always seemed to be at Southwest Jenkins Road up in Beaverton, Oregon. It was going to Nike. I mean, they were probably our best customer. And I said to Jean-Luc, does this bother you? And he says, well, this won't get big until Nike gets in. I was afraid of Nike. And, you know, Nike was absolutely inspired by Hoka, right? Oversized. But they did things better in some regards. They went right after. They said you can run fast wearing oversized racing shoes. Hoka we didn't commit to that. And
so were you afraid they would sort of take your idea and run with it?
I thought, well, they're so big.
Yeah.
But, you know, Hoka is now a $2.5 billion brand. But today, I would guess that the oversized running market between all the brands is $75 billion. But, you know, it's funny. When Nike went oversized, I mean, everybody left Hoka alone. It was out there on this island. 1 year would go by, and 2 years would go by, and 3 years would go by, and 4 years would go by. You're thinking, what in the hell? I mean, and Hoka is just growing and growing and growing. No running brand had grown from 0 to 100 million in the United States in 40 years before Hoka. And, you know, so these guys the whole industry, they were so much navel gazing.
Yeah,
I guess. And I think all of those smart people in those labs just couldn't admit they were wrong or couldn't break out of the paradigm of...
Maybe just jealous?
No, I don't think that. I think they thought they were smarter.
Yeah.
I really do. And so, you know, they gave us this free runway for 7 years, and then Nike jumps in. And, of course, once Nike jumped in, then everybody's going to copy Nike. And so then here comes New Balance and Asics and Adidas and
Brooks.
But it took and Brooks.
Yeah.
Once Nike got in, it took those other brands another 2 or 3 or 4 years to really get after it. And now, you know, it's a dogfight out there. I mean, Every shoe now today is better than any shoe was 4 or 5 years ago.
So it really helped to have their delay, really.
Oh, well, it built Hoka into a multi-billion-dollar brand.
How does it feel to sort of, you know, pick a little wild card like Hoka and have it
Oh,
be so successful.
It's fun and it's rewarding and it's fun to watch, and we all focus on our winners. So you want me to tell you about how dumb I am now?
Sure. What are some things you've learned along the way?
Well, I mean, just things that I've met. You think I found Hoka and I recognized it, and I did. I could see it. I had a friend at Deckers. He said, Stuart, we need to make a shoe that I don't have to bend down to put on. Now, keep in mind, I'm a hard worker, dedicated. I'm like, what the hell? Why do you need a shoe you don't need to bend down? I mean,
yeah.
Well, now Kissicks, slip-on athletic shoes are a huge market. I don't know whether it's several $100 million market. Skechers copied Kissick. Nike licensed the Kissick brand for that. So, slip-on athletic shoes, I completely missed.
My running shoes are always slip-on. I just tie the laces one time when I first get them.
I know.
And I slip them on.
Oh, I don't like guys like you, but I believe you. If I did that on a soccer field, what would you do to me?
I do the same thing, actually. I warm up with my laces untied because I feel the shoe fits my foot, and then I tighten the laces.
Another one I missed was, On came out and they had these little holes in them, and it's mechanical cushioning. It was basically the same thing K-Swiss did with tubes.
Yeah.
And I knew that it would collapse, and if you kind of looked at it, it was kind of, they didn't put the tubes all the way through because they knew it wouldn't hold up. And I'm like, I dismissed that, like, oh, that's never going to work. Well, guess what? They might be bigger than Hoka now. So that tells you how dumb I am.
I agree, though. That is the ugliest shoe I've ever seen.
Yeah, but people think it's cute. I mean, so.
And they did come out of nowhere.
Yeah, and I guess the thing that you learn from this is you win some and you lose some, and you're never as smart as you think you are, and you're probably not as dumb as you think you are when you miss something. But I've missed a lot of things too.
So all of this has led to Blumaka.
Yes.
Your baby. You started it yourself, your idea, your execution.
Well, I mean, I didn't start it alone. I mean, an old friend came to me, and he had some rough prototypes. For whatever reason, he never really started a factory. He was kind of looking for other brands to build factories for him, which was not going to work. And so he had the idea and the patents, and I came in to really commercialize it and decided that we're going to brand it Blumaka. We're going to build a factory. We're going to make our own components. And the initial idea was that, look, if you're throwing away enough waste for me to make 5 billion insoles, and everybody in the industry is talking about waste foam, all I need to do is make a product, and these companies will certainly embrace you for part of it. So I go out there, and whether you go to, I went up the street here to Patagonia. Oh no,
embrace isn't the word I'd use.
No, they didn't embrace it. They're still selling shoes that are made in a pretty toxic way, in my view. But they're not alone. But so I go out there, and people would say, "Well, I see what you're doing, or say you're doing, but I don't think you can manufacture that." Well, no, I can. I've got the prototype. Well, yeah, but that's not manufacturing. So I said, "Well, I'm going to make an insole." So I made an insole. I take it back to the shoe companies. Well, I made it. Well, that's not a midsole. Well, I said, well, while I'm making an insole, I'm going to solve a problem because you've noticed I'm getting a little older, and so I like running trails. But, it really frustrated me when you run a trail, your toes are always jamming into the bottom of the toes of your shoes. And you go to the great store, and the salesperson says, "Oh, well, your shoes are not fitting properly. You need a different this shoe, or you need another. You need one sock, or you need a half a sock, or you need two socks, or." And I don't care what you did. When you ran hard downhills, your toes jammed at the end of the shoes.
Yeah, they slip forward.
Yeah. Well, if you're slipping forward, Patty, what's happening when you're going up a hill? You think you're slipping backwards?
Yeah.
It just doesn't hurt. And I noticed on side hills, and every trail is a side hill. There's no flat trail out there. And I noticed my shoes, great traction, stick to the ground. But then my foot would slide to the side. Then I'd feel it in my ankle, and I'm like, is my ankle going over, or is my knee going to pop? And it was disconcerting because when I took a step to go up a hill or a trail, my shoe plants, then my foot slides, my ankle rolls a little, and then I have to hold my knee. Well, every minute or every second that I wasn't going up the hill, I was sliding sideways. So I wasn't very efficient. And I go, why is this happening? Because my sock is sliding on my insole. So if I make an insole where your sock doesn't slide, change the coefficient of friction. Your foot is not sliding inside your sock because your skin and your sock are a different coefficient of friction. So if I can make an insole that has the same coefficient of friction as skin, my sock is going to stick to it. So I did that, and I sent it to a baseball player, Mike Yastrzemski, up with the Giants. And, you can talk anybody into anything. So I didn't want to bother him. I just sent him insoles, waiting for him to reply, thinking, well, maybe this is good for sports. I thought it was good for trails. Don't hear from him for 2 months. Week before spring training. Hey, Stuart, this is Mike Yastrzemski. Hey, Mike, how you doing? He goes, hey, can I get some more insoles? I go, well, do you like them? He goes, oh, I love them, blah, blah. I go, well, thanks for telling me. I said, well, I sent you 2 pair. What happened to the second pair? Oh, I gave them to the catcher for the Cubs, and he won't give them back. So I sent him a couple more pair. He gets to spring training, get a call. Hey, Stuart, can you send me 5 more pair? I got some teammates on them. Sure, Mike. A couple days later. Hey, Stuart, Mike, can you send me 5 more pair? Sure. A couple days later. Stuart. Yeah, Mike. Hey, you got 5 more? I said, Mike, you have every insole I've ever made. He says, well, you better crank up the factory because these things work. And so, he starts telling people, pro baseball players get on it. And one thing has led to another to the point where we now have, I think, every Major League Baseball team in America has athletes buying our product. Many of the teams are buying it. Half the NFL teams are buying our product. We've got pro soccer, lacrosse teams buying it. And we have all this data that says if you don't slip in, and you're going to go, oh, okay, Stuart's just a sales guy, and you wouldn't believe it if I told you, but it's true.
I believe it.
But one professional sports franchise, we didn't pay for it, 200 pro athletes. Took their shoes, their insoles, then the only thing they switched was our insole. 90% of the athletes ran faster when they put our insole in. 80% stopped faster. 80% started faster. And 80% had a greater stability from the knee to the ground, which, of course, is an injury reduction thing. And then I had a PGA golf professional test 40 athletes. Didn't call me. I didn't pay for it. 70% of the athletes, it didn't help 30%. 70% hit the ball 10 yards farther with their driver and 13 yards longer with the 7-iron. And these are not studies I paid to get and finagled around the data. So what we're talking about here is you're just increasing ground reaction force. You would never think of going out and playing soccer in a gymnasium in stocking feet because you have no ground reaction force.
You'd slip.
You wouldn't go out on a soccer pitch and play in smooth bottom Converse All-Star shoes because you'd slip. but you're perfectly willing to go play every sport and slip around inside your shoes, which is inefficient. And everything we do in footwear is designed to hold the foot in place by cinching the foot down with laces or a BOA system, cinching from the outside, using the outside of the shoe to pinch you in. It would be like getting in your Porsche. I saw it parked out front, your Porsche, and putting the seat belts on the outside of the car and expecting you not to wobble around inside the car. Why do we think that we shouldn't stabilize the internal surface of the shoe on the plantar surface of the foot to keep you stable? And so that's what Blumaka is doing. And these pro athletes, they don't care whether we're sustainable or recycled or not. They could care less. But what I love about this is that we're taking the trash that everybody else is throwing away, and we're making insoles that we guarantee the cushioning 1,000 miles. The insoles that are coming in your shoes when you go down to the running store are failing in somewhere between 5 and 20 miles. And nobody will tell you, but we guarantee them 1,000 miles. Challenge me on it. I will win. And so we're making better product that performs better out of what they're throwing away. And that's fun. And we also make some midsole cushioning systems for people like Allbirds. And so it's I didn't get the reception that I thought I would get from the industry. I thought they would surely want to use some of their trash, especially if it's cost neutral. I thought retailers and great brands would want to carry flip-flops and slides that are made more thoughtfully. But it's a hard story to tell. And it's particularly hard when big brands are basically telling a story. You know, they'll say this is recycled. Well, it'll have 5% recycled particle, whatever.
Mm-hmm. They're trying to discredit you.
Well, they're trying to put the best spin on whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
If you read the sustainability reports from big footwear brands, and it comes to foam, they'll have pages and pages on everything they're doing. And then there's a paragraph on foam, and it says we're converting it to energy. Means they're burning it, yeah. Which means you're breathing it. And so we think we have something, we're making a better product in a better way. And when you can do that and also be improving athletic performance and protection, it's good. But, it's not exactly like we have been met at the water's edge as conquering heroes. So,
yeah.
We're fighting for every inch.
Yeah, I mean, people want to keep their business and keep the way things are, and you've got a better product with, better manufacturing, so.
Yeah, it's just been surprising people don't want to use their own trash to make great product.
Well, talk about a find,
Yeah, I'm still perplexed.
Yeah. When did you sort of see? When did you have that moment of revelation where oh, it's the insole?
It was on a trail up behind Santa Barbara
when you were running.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you just put up with something for so long, you don't see anything else. You don't. But everybody complains about jamming their toes on a trail, hiking, running. And why you don't stop yourself and interrupt that moment and go, why is that? Do we really have to live with that?
Yeah. So that was the problem you solved with Blumaka.
Well, really right now you have to convince people or remind them that it's a problem.
Yeah.
And, you go to a golfer and, it's like, really? And yet, they're going to go out and spend $700 on a new driver to try to get 10 yards. And I can sell them an insole for $60.
Yeah.
And they'll get 10 yards.
You think
70% of them.
You think maybe more elite athletes appreciate it more?
Well, there's no question. I mean, you think of it as you know, when I tell people, well, we're half the NFL teams and all these pro athletes and stuff, they're far more aware of the Blumaka brand than the average person.
Yeah.
But I don't have $10 million to run a Super Bowl ad and tell everybody or hire some athlete to say, this cures cancer. I mean, I don't have that kind of resources to make it commonly known, which is why I come to speak with some of the most respected podcasters in the world.
Well, I'm excited, to share it with our soccer club. Our club grows and grows every year, and
well, do we need to get you an affiliate code and set up so that your guys can get a little discount, and Patty can
make some cash on the side?
Yeah, pay for that Porsche.
Yeah, no, that might work. So let's talk a little bit, briefly. Give me some business tips. You've been in business for a long time. You know how to start a factory. What are some things some easy business ideas or tips, for someone like me that...
Well, the easy startup, Patty, somebody else's. There are no easy startups. And I think you have to understand that. I think you're always better off making sure that you are really solving a problem and you aren't a solution looking for a problem. I always describe innovation as, if you have a rock in your shoe, what do? You don't form a committee on rocks and shoes. You don't have a meeting about rocks and shoes. You stop and take the rock out of your shoe because that's a pain point. And I think innovation or starting businesses is really about finding the pain point. Does the community not have the service you need? Is the product not working as efficiently? Jean-Luc and Nico said it was no fun. In the Alps, they loved to get to the top of the mountain so they could ski off. It was a blast. They loved to get their bicycle to the top because going down was a blast. They ran to the top of the mountain, and it was not a blast getting off the mountain. It was another B word. And they said, we want to make downhill running fun. So they identified the problem, and they said, this is solvable.
Just writing that down. Find the pain points.
Yeah. Because
that's where the real change, you feel it.
Yeah. And, I thought the pain point of the footwear industry was that they're throwing all this waste foam away and they'd want to solve it. They didn't.
Guess it's not painful enough for them.
Yeah, I guess. So the line of demarcation between stupid stubbornness and professional persistence is hard to find. I've seen innovators or business people that have stayed at a bad idea too long, and I hope I'm not one of them. I think the other thing to be aware of is that if you're going to find out if you solve that problem, really expose your idea to people that aren't going to tell you nice things. Your mom's going to love everything you invent or everything you create. Yeah. And it was the reason I didn't call Mike Yastrzemski back, because if I called him every day, is this good? It's really. But when he called me, I knew it was good.
Yeah, when he wanted more.
Yeah. And I would say the other thing is that the world is big. I was just in Dubai, guys recycling 43 million pair of shoes. Expose yourself to the world. What's going on in China is phenomenal and has been phenomenal for decades in terms of manufacturing. Don't limit yourself to just what's going on in this country. I think you'll miss a lot. I mean, I think the best running shoes in the world right now are in China, not the United States.
Is Deckers looking to make another?
I don't know. I'm not over at Deckers, so that's them. But the best electric cars in the world are in China. Now they've got some advantages in terms of what the government's doing to support all that crap, and you never quite know. But still, they're making great electric cars. I mean, they're making cars that are priced like less than Tesla that are appointed like Porsche.
Mm.
And that's pretty cool.
Well, those are two good points.
I
Find the pain point and be open to new ideas in the world.
And, you know, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to be willing to work in days that end in Y.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why, you know, it works out for you. Well, Stuart, I appreciate you coming on. Can't wait to use the product. I won't say try. Use the product. And, yeah, wish you all the best.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Keep training athletes to be their best.